Thank you. Thank you so much for the time. First question, obviously, Stephen, you mentioned about making evenly matched fights for Showtime. And, one thing that I also noticed in recent years is how some of these big fights on Showtime also led to, other big and sometimes bigger fights for the network. So obviously when you're planning these fights and rolling out the schedule, how much sort of that long-term matchmaking sort of play a role? Like, for example, having Tim Tszyu and Terrell Gausha and the winner likely fighting the winner of Charlo Castaño next. So how much sort of that play a role when you're sort of making these fights and rolling out the schedule?
It's a great point, and it's a very big role. And that's one of the advantages. Look, the Tszyu-Gausha fight is a big fight in itself. But on top of that, if the winner, whether it's Gausha or happens to be Tszyu, goes on to a title fight, at least in the case of Tszyu, that our audience will be more familiar with him going forward. So, we don't always like to see a guy just pop up for a title fight. We'd like to get him there. And if you've been along for the journey with Boots Ennis, you're invested in getting him to a title shot and positioning him in the welterweight division. Same thing with these 154 pounders. I think it's a benefit to the sport when we can sort of show the path toward a title fight. Mm-hmm. It's not just, hey, here's a title fight, right? But you can see it coming, months in advance. The chess pieces moving around, and to be able to say, okay, I'm watching this fight and it's meaningful because the winner of this fight gets X or Y or Z.
And I think that's probably when you look at that 154-pound division, as you pointed out, we have the top 6 guys here. It'd be meaningful to see those guys, whoever wins. I mean, Charlo Lubin again would be unbelievable. Charlo Harrison again would be unbelievable. Mm-hmm. But let's see those guys battle it out and see who's the best of those guys, and then fight those.
And it's something that that historically boxing has been criticized for, and I think unfairly so, at least currently. What we're seeing, I think, is more and more. Losing in boxing doesn't carry the stigma that it once did.
Absolutely.
So when we look at the super bantamweight division, whether it's Stephen Fulton or Danny Roman or Angelo Leo or Rais Alim, it really doesn't matter who wins or loses those fights. The reality, Fulton versus Danny Roman is a good fight because we've seen both of them on. They've been entertaining before. And so we will continue round robining guys like that. And that's another advantage of putting out a schedule like this, is becoming familiar and looking at the possibilities going forward.
That's good, sir. Next question.
And one other question, I had, obviously, you mentioned that having that Showtime Championship Boxing card leading into the Spence Ugas pay-per-view sort of first-time thing. Are you looking at that as a one-time thing, or is maybe looking at that as an experiment that you might consider doing for future pay-per-view events?
Look, I think it's experimenting. Look, we know not everybody out there is looking forward to maybe 4 or 5 hours of boxing. Certainly our hardcore fans, I think, will appreciate it. So it's an experiment, and in this case, it's really a function of an embarrassment of riches and having so many good cards and so many good fights to do that. Even, the pay-per-view undercard wasn't enough to contain all the fights that we had to get done. So I think as long as we can deliver that level of quality, why not, double down and make this one of the biggest boxing nights of the year? In this case, 2 really intriguing, TV Showtime fights along with a pay-per-view card. That's a fight party. That's a great fight party right there.
Thank you so much.